Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Whole Elephant. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1, my very first podcast episode. I'm honored that you're here. My name is Eric McClenahan. I'm starting this podcast, and it's called The Whole Elephant, because a number of years ago, I came across the poem, The Blind Men and the Elephant. And essentially, it's a poem about 6 blind men who were asked to describe an elephant, and each one of them just describes the elephant based on the first thing that they touch. So one man walks in and just touches the trunk and says, oh, an elephant is like a snake. And another just touches the legs and says an elephant is like a tree. And so I started to realize after hearing that poem that, man, my life, I've only seen and experienced one very narrow perspective. And I've only seen that culturally. I've only seen that from a religious, spiritual aspect. And I want to try to go on this journey of experiencing, seeing the whole elephant. And so each episode, we're going to talk to a different person who's got a cool career, something going on in life that maybe we don't know the whole perspective of what they do. And then we're also going to talk to them about their faith journey, totally non-judgmental, not agenda-filled. Just want to know with what they're at, with who is God and spirituality and why are we here and those sorts of questions. So today we're kicking it off with a good friend of mine, Jamil Frazier. Jamil is a health coach, a writer, an entrepreneur. He just launched his brand, Think Life is Different, and I thought he would be a great first person to chat with. So hope you enjoyed the chat. Good morning, Jamil. It's nice and early. It's early for an artist.
I know you're not an early riser. I remember those days. Man, it's good to be here.
You know what it is, though? It's not that I'm not an early riser. I have to be in a rhythm. I'm a rhythm person. Like right now, my wife stays home and teaches my daughter because it's online, learning, and she takes care of that. So it's my responsibility to get her up, make her breakfast, make sure she's dressed for school, all those things. So as long as I'm in the rhythm of doing that, then I'm fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But doesn't that still require you to get up at 6 o'clock or something?
No, 7. It's not that bad. Not that bad.
Not too egregious.
Yeah, but if I'm in the rhythm of doing it, then I'm fine.
Right. It's just
what is a
rhythm.
What does a Jamil Frazier morning look like?
Well, I'm up at 5, and these days I am down in the kitchen by 6, getting in a protein shake, and then I'm off for a run. I'm in my gym by 7. Do a half an hour weightlifting session. And then I'm in the shower from about 7:30 to 7:45. I have 2 bottles of water in the shower, and then I'm ready for my first call at 8 and ready to rock and roll.
So not very regimented.
Not at all.
You haven't planned it out. It's every day. Yeah, whatever happens. I'll sleep in today. Whatever. Order some Postmates, get some McDonald's. No big deal.
Yeah, not very structured at all. You know what, man? But if I don't do that, and I'm not saying I'm perfect every day, by no means. But I try to win the week. Is what I call it. But if I don't, and if I don't have structure, that's when things start to get crazy for me. I literally feel like things are going crazy. And that I'm out of control, and that I'm not in flow, I guess. You said, you're a rhythm guy. I'm sort of like that rhythm guy. I'm the guy that literally for the last 4 months I've had the same dinner, which has been tilapia, spinach, and mushrooms. And I don't need anything different. I just need to know, and I'm fine. I just need to know step by step, day by day, structure. And when I get out of that, it takes me probably a good 2 weeks to get back into it.
Yeah, no, my wife and I are the same, probably me more than her, but we have a rotation of about 4 dinners really that we say that we make it different by, adding some different spices here or there, but it's the same thing.
Save stuff.
There's something about like, I don't know. I don't know if you feel this way, but there's something about cooking that in all the chaos of life that happens, when you cook, you add salt, it tastes a little better. You cook it to the right temperature, it's controllable. Out
Yeah.
of all the uncontrollable things in life, you can control how your food tastes. You control, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
control every night, I'm just going to eat this. And I'm fine with that. It's a
And I'm
given.
good.
It's one thing in my day I don't have to think about or worry about. And it makes me happy. So great. Why do I have to mix it
So
up?
I'm good with it. And it's funny though, because there's a lot of people that are not like that. For example, my kids, like they want variety. They'll say, Daddy, even if we're gonna eat out, they'll say, Daddy, where you want to go? They know I'm gonna say El Pollo Loco, so I can get the double avocado salad. It never varies, right? So like
Yeah.
they hate even asking me, where do you want to go? Because they
Right.
want variety.
Right.
And if you try to give me variety, I go to a restaurant that has too big of a menu. I remember back in the day, what was that restaurant where the menu was so overwhelming? It was a Cheesecake Factory.
Oh yeah. No, that
And,
thing's a novel, an absolute
and,
novel.
and I would just sit there just staring at it like there's too many options. Like
Yeah.
I just need two options and I can stick with it.
No, Cheesecake Factory is, think of anything you've ever ordered from any restaurant ever and just order that and they have it.
They
For
have it
sure.
times 10.
Well, man, you've hit a point in your life where you're successful. Right now, you can say, I've made some money, I've figured out my health, I've done all that, but let's go on a little journey here and take me back to the time where you weren't successful, the time where you weren't healthy, and where that change started to happen.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I get to talk to a lot of people now and travel around and tell my story and you're a part of that story too and but it's been interesting. I grew up here in Southern California in a city called Pasadena that I know you know well.
Mm-hmm.
My mom is one of those moms. I always say that she can put the weight of the world on her shoulders and make it look rather easy. Grew up in a single parent household. My father was in and out of prison in my early years, and my mom was there to sort of fend for us. But she had a rough life. Both of her parents passed away at a young age, about 6 weeks from one another, which led her to fend for her younger siblings. About a year after her parents died, her baby brother was shot and killed in gang violence. And so that set her down a spiral. And the only way she could understand how to cope with that was drugs and alcohol. So by the time my me and my siblings came, she was deep into alcohol and was deep into a drug addiction. And we came up on the system on welfare.
Yeah.
And I always say one of the best things she ever did was move us about 11 miles east to a new city, to where I had a new environment, gained some new friends, and fell in love with athletics. And my life ambition became to someday get that football scholarship. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I worked towards. I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs. I just wanted to play ball, man. And I know you
Yeah.
know about that. And
The
um,
athletics gave you a structure, which you've said helps for you.
gave me a structure and knew exactly what we were working towards and I had the right environment and my buddies all thought the same way. Like all we wanted to do was play. That was
Yeah.
it. Just play and run and compete. And so a few years later, I did get that football scholarship, athletic scholarship. That's where I met you at
Yeah.
Azusa Pacific University. We played ball there, and it was fantastic. It was like the greatest time of my life. Met so many amazing people. And then once I graduated, I did what everybody else does. I went and I looked for that successful job, which I got in pharmaceutical sales, working for Johnson and Johnson. Married a beautiful girl. I always say I lost the bet, and so or she lost the bet, and that's why she had to marry me. And everything on the outside looked good. You know, I had the company car, I had the expense account, I had the beautiful wife. And shortly after we got pregnant, and this is really where the story turned for me, because when we got pregnant, I wasn't ready for it. And given the way that I grew up, I was scared, man.
Yeah.
And I already was already nervous about being in the marriage. And for anyone who's gotten married probably
Scared how?
understands.
Scared because you didn't want to repeat what happened for your kid to your
Scared,
kids, or scared for what?
scared because I didn't want to repeat that cycle, but also nervous because I was already had a foot outside of the marriage. I felt like we
Mm,
maybe didn't make the best decision.
right.
And so when we got pregnant, I asked my wife if she would consider having an abortion. And if you ever have that conversation with your spouse, it usually doesn't go that well. And there's a lot of resentment that
Mm,
happens from that on both sides. And she was not open to going down that road, thankfully. I
yeah.
look back at it now, but I fell into a 2-year depression. It's weird when you feel like you don't have control, and it's strange when you feel like the walls are closing down on you, and you can't move. See, I couldn't leave because of the way I grew up and the promises I made myself as a little boy when my father wasn't there. But I
Yeah.
also didn't want to stay. So what do you do? And so the only thing that I knew to do was to retreat and to go into a depressed state and to blame. Um, and with any sort of depression, you start drinking a little bit too much.
Mm,
You start gaining a little bit too much weight. You start ruining relationships. You start losing employment. All those things happen to me. And so I look up after a 2-year stint. I'm about 40 pounds heavier. I've already lost a job. I've lost a lot of relationships, and and I don't see a way out. I was fortunate to have one of my buddies who I grew up with, and wanted to play ball, and he says you should reach out to my mom. She's become a health coach, and she can help you start to get back on track. And I thought he was crazy. What is some 65-year-old woman who never played ball like me gonna help me with, or gonna teach
mm.
me? And I went to go sit with her, and heard about how she could help me, and decided to get going with her. And he was absolutely right. I started with my physical health, lost the weight. I started feeling energy and vitality, started to see a little glimmer of hope, even though we were still battling in our relationship. And then she says, you're pretty influential. I've noticed people have been noticing your journey. What do you think about starting your own health coaching business
Mhm.
and helping other people sort of transform? And I did slowly, but I didn't really think that it was for me, until I went to a seminar. And at the seminar, that's where the life changed for me. I started to see a lot of people who were just like me. They were just normal people doing extraordinary things. They were really finding freedom for themselves by helping other people transform and find freedom.
Freedom in what
I
way?
started,
What kind of
I,
freedoms?
whatever that freedom meant to them. For some
Mm,
people, that would be physical freedom, to where they can now move, or they can bend down and play with their grandkids, or
sure.
they can have the freedom of healthy blood pressure and maybe rid themselves of high blood pressure. Other people will find a freedom in time. They were hard workers. They were just sort of in a wrong vehicle. And so they
Mhm.
showed up to this conference, really wanted to learn how to build a business and how to create more time freedom, structure, maybe some financial well being. And some people were looking for purpose, and they were lacking freedom in their lives because they were walking down roads that didn't lead to the purpose that they were looking for. So I'm noticing all this, and I'm examining, and I'm saying, and I'm being inspired. I'm being inspired, and I met a guy there who looked like me, and consequently, I see him walking across stage, and he's walking across stage holding his wife's hand, and walking across holding his daughter's hand. And in
Mm,
that moment, I saw my wife and my 1-year-old son. And this same guy ended up coming up to me a couple hours later. And the thing that really got me was he never really talked about himself. He only asked questions and listened and wanted to find out about me.
Mm.
And as he was asking questions, he asked what I did. I told him I was in medical sales, and it just so happens that he told me he was also in pharmaceutical sales, also worked for Johnson and Johnson. And I asked him, I said, so what else do you do, outside of building your coaching business? Because I didn't think that you could build a lucrative business. I thought you had to have a second job or something
Right.
like
This is
that.
everyone's side gig that they're doing on the side.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And he says no. And he didn't even say no. What he did was he gave a little smirk, like almost to say, like, what do you
This guy
mean?
doesn't get it yet.
Right. He doesn't
Yeah.
understand. And so he says, I don't do anything. I coach. I help other people transform. And I said, well, what does your wife do? Because naturally his wife has got to, you know,
Yeah.
you can't make income just with a little coaching business. And he
Yeah.
says she's a beautiful stay-at-home mother. She stays at home with our daughter, and I was like, get out of here. And he just kind of smirked, almost like he knew something that I didn't know.
Mm.
And that stuck with me. And so I came back home. Couple months later, I quit my job. Decided this was part of my purpose. I was going to build in, and now 8 years later, 90,000 clients later, and close to 40 million in revenue a year. And now we've written a couple books and put some videos out there, which you've been a part of, and get to travel around and help coach other people and help people to their transformations, and doing a lot of keynote speaking these days. And now I get
Mhm.
to be here with you.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you talk about freedom, and that really all depends on what you want, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
when you were doing medical sales, you were grinding, you were going door to door, you were grinding, you were working. You're not working hard. You're still grinding right now. You still put a
Yeah.
lot of hours into this, but it's freedom because it's on your terms. It's freedom because it's something that you're passionate about. Like, how do you define that freedom now? Because you're still a hard worker. I know that you're still making calls all day. You have called me while you're on vacation with your family. Like, I know these
Sure.
things are happening. What does that freedom look like to you now?
Sure. So the freedom for me isn't the hard work. I've always been a hard worker. For anyone who's ever known me, they would say Jamil's a hardworking guy. The lack of freedom came in my hard work being invested into places and people that didn't give a return that I was looking for. So
Mm,
when I was at that seminar, one of the reasons why I started crying that weekend was because I finally got in touch with what I actually did want. See, for a long time there, and even in my depressed state, I was so focused on what I didn't want. And I sort of got married to that, waking up every day thinking about lack instead of looking at thinking about abundance. What do I want to
mm,
create? And that was the first time that I really gotten in touch with that, which is weird. And I write about it in my book, The 12 Shifts, because as an athlete, we always do that. Like, we always look towards the future, and we always say, this is what I want to produce, and this is how I'm going to get my body, and this is how many passing yards I'm going to throw for, this is my rushing yards. We always
yeah.
do that. But somehow in my life, I stopped doing that.
Mm,
And so that weekend, I made a covenant with myself, a commitment. I said I wanted the first thing that was going to bring freedom for me was happiness. So I wanted to be happy.
yeah.
The next thing was I wanted to be stress free.
Yeah.
And these things are still consistent to the things that I want now, 8 years later. The next thing was I wanted to, at that time, keep my son in my house because we were going to separate. Divorce papers were always on the table. There's no way she was going to stay with me.
Yeah.
And so if I need to keep my son in my house, then somehow I got to figure out how to get this marriage and bind this marriage back together. That would be freedom. The next thing was I needed to start walking the beach every day, and I needed to practice yoga in the middle of the day when I wanted to and not when someone gave me permission to. That
Mm,
was going to bring freedom. And then I said, well, one of the reasons why we're always in a fight, my wife and I, is because of lack, of scarcity, of not having enough. We were always just a step below okay.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to earn a certain amount of income so that I could stop all of these arguments about money. And so I set that sort of income goal there that would bring, at that point, what I thought would be financial, well-being, financial freedom. You hear a lot of people. That obviously has extended quite
Yeah.
quite a bit since then. But those were the things. And I said, okay, so how can I be happy? How can I be stress free? How can I walk the beach every day? Um, Living that sort of lifestyle. How can I do what I want to do when I want to do it? And
Yeah.
being able to live that lifestyle for me was a freedom story that I wanted to chase.
Right. Right. I mean, in the Bible, it says, where there's no vision, the people perish.
Mm.
Do you find that in a lot of people, that a lot of people are just going to their jobs day after day? They don't even dream or think that something can change, that their marriage can change, that their job can change, that those situations can change. It seems like you were stuck in that cycle for a while.
Yeah, and now that I've had the chance to individually coach thousands of people and speak for companies and sit with CEOs and stuff like that, that wasn't just sort of a Jamil challenge. That's a human being challenge.
Yeah.
Um, and and one of the reasons why that's a challenge is because we have I call them Stanley. So inside of all of our heads, there's like two people, and we
Hmm.
all know that those people are there. It's the one person that says, "Get up at 6 o'clock, go work out,"
Yeah.
and the other person says, "Nope, stay in bed. It's cozy. Just do it tomorrow."
Right.
So my do it tomorrow is Stanley, and the challenge is for most of us, Stanley runs our life, and so that's what started to happen to me, and it creeps in subtly. And as we grow, that Stanley, that alter ego, becomes more sophisticated too, and so
Mm.
now has some more sophisticated reasonings to you.
Yeah.
So don't set that goal out there. You're probably not going to reach it. Right? Don't think to expand a little bit. That's probably not for you. That's for Timmy. That's for John.
Right.
Don't try to lose that weight. I mean, you tried that a couple years ago and it didn't go well. And you put it all back on anyway. Oh, don't get engaged with that tough conversation.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to go anywhere, and you're going to ruin relationships. And so what we do is we get super comfortable with being super comfortable,
Hmm.
and that is part of our genetic makeup as well. And so it's hard to fight through that. It's hard to constantly force yourself to look out to the future and to now start to create instead of just react. And this is
Yeah.
why you see so many people who are stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
So many people are struggling physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. It's because we become okay with being less than and operating in states that are less than what we actually have to give.
Right. Right. Isn't it funny? I mean, you've gotten, like you said, you have a chance to mentor through coaching and through health, getting people's health back on track, thousands of people, right? And you hear these stories, and it's very similar in ministry. You just hear story after story of people's lives, and there's so much more commonality than there are differences, right?
Hmm.
I would imagine that when somebody comes to you now, within the first 3 minutes, you get their story because you've heard it
Yeah,
before. There's
yeah.
no one can tell you anything new about their health at this point, right? And I just wish, like, our country is in such division right now, and you're in this great spot where you get to see the commonality that
Hmm.
binds us all together. And we think
Hmm.
that, so many times in our health journey, you're talking about like the Stanleys that talk to us. I think the biggest thing that he says in all of it is that you're alone, that you're the only
Hmm.
one that's
Hmm.
ever dealt with this. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like nobody else is on board. If we would just be open and share and hear stories and talk to each other, we could be like, hey, yeah, I struggle with that too. And that's part of the brilliance of the community of health that you've created is, even on the Facebook group, you can go on there and go, hey, I'm not the only one. That's cool. I'm not alone in this.
I think the importance in that too, and you're right, within the first 5 minutes, you can hear you hear it over and over again. What I also hear, which has been fascinating study, is what most people are saying when you get down to the root as well is I'm not enough and I don't feel like I'm enough. And
Yeah.
oftentimes when people are saying internally, consciously or subconsciously, most of the time subconsciously, they don't even know that they're saying this to themselves. And that's one of the things that deteriorates or even halts having those conversations that you're talking about. Because a
Right.
lot of people are walking around feeling like, well, I'm not enough.
Right.
And so who am
That
I to
other
even have a
person, that other
conversation like
person that
that?
I see losing the weight has something that I don't have. They have some kind of
Sure.
strength, some kind of power that I don't possess, and it's not true.
It's not true at all. And the same is true with operating towards anything that we want in life. You know, what I was saying even on today, I was doing a talk, and I was talking about so much of what we do or what we don't do originates in the mind. And Scripture will say the same thing: as he or she thinks, so shall it be. And they always talk about having a renewing of the mind, a renewing
Mm-hmm.
of the mind. And as we're out there operating, most of these things that are showing up for us are showing up because of our mindsets, but also because of what I call clay. So in the second book we put out, it's called The 12 Shifts. The first shift, the first chapter is you have superpowers, and it talks about the awareness of consciousness and awareness of operating out of our most powerful tool, which is our brain, our ability to think. This is what sets us apart from all other creatures, right?
Yeah.
But usually we're not even the ones that are running that ship or driving that car.
Mm.
And so I have all these beautiful stories about how the ways in which I think or thought and the shift that needed to occur weren't even me. For example, I'm sitting here talking to you on a chair. Well, it's not just Jamil sitting on this chair. It's my mom sitting on this chair. It's my dad. It's my high school
Yeah.
pastor. It's my high
Yeah.
school coaches. Right? It's Kim in the fifth grade that told me I was fat and ugly. It's
Yeah.
all of these people, situations, and circumstances that now have come together to form my own thought constructs or what I
Right.
believed was my own thought constructs. And
Right.
the shift needs to take place of where we move out of operating of what other people are saying and giving us that clay, and
Right.
now moving into understanding how to create our own clay and operate out of our miracles, our gifts.
Right. That's interesting. Also not just those aspects, but you're sitting there with DNA that was formed because of thousands and thousands of years of DNA being passed down. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like people
right.
say, "Oh, I can't lose the weight. I have low metabolism." Like, no, that's your DNA. But you can be beyond that. You can move past all those.
Sure. Anytime that you want. Another things you'll hear that really holds people back is they'll give themselves labels,
Mm.
and our labels become our identity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you'll hear
And
folks
our
say,
excuse.
and our excuse.
Yeah.
So you know what? I, I I couldn't hold a podcast and do what Eric's doing. I'm the shy one.
Right. Right. Right.
And it's like, hmm, okay,
Right.
that's a great story that you've been married to for 40 years.
Right.
Where did that come from? And at
Right.
any time you want, you can change that
Yeah. About everything. I'm a really nice
about
person. I know.
everything.
I know. I cussed you out right now, but I'm Italian. You know, or like, or whatever. Like we use those labels all the time to make excuses.
Yes. But half the time, and this is why the first shift is you have superpower, is because most of the time you don't even know that you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so deeply
There's
ingrained
no
in who you are.
awareness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That you think that it's you and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. So the podcast is called The Whole Elephant, and it's not because of my weight. It is because of the poem The Blind Man and the Elephant, where six blind men are asked to describe an elephant, and each one just describes it based on the first thing that they see. So, the first blind man walks up and feels the trunk and says, "Oh, an elephant's like a snake." Next
Yes.
guy says, grabs the tail. "Oh, an elephant's like a rope." What do you think people are missing, not seeing about their health? What are the common threads that you see where people look at their health, or maybe they look at dieting plans or whatever? They're just seeing a small part, they're not seeing the whole thing. What are the keys to health that people aren't seeing?
That is such a deep and broad, and I would say the biggest thing is that I say it like this: it all inter R, it all interconnects, it all interbe.
Mm,
There is, when I look at health, especially now, and I didn't back then. Back then, I saw it as you're physically fit, and that was the lens that I saw it out of, being an
mhm.
athlete and just working with high performers, and being around the guys we got to be around, lift weights and ran like the wind. Now I do not see it like that at all. I see
Mm,
that every single thing operates into one. And so the biggest thing that people are missing is what I've been talking about, and it's consciousness, it's
yeah.
mindset.
Mhm.
And our thoughts are so flippin' powerful or so strong. And what it does is it usually brings us to an emotion. And that emotion usually brings us to an action. And that action usually leads to a habit.
Yeah.
And so, what folks are trying to do oftentimes is they're trying to put a band aid on
Mm,
what they think the outside of the problem is, instead of getting to the root. And the
right.
root is, how are you thinking to begin with? That is
Right.
where it starts. And
Right.
most people don't spend enough time figuring out how to control that. I call it becoming the surgical master of your mind.
Yeah.
And as you can learn how to do that, and I'm definitely not perfect at it.
Yeah.
I have some tools that help me, but I slip up too, still
Right.
quite frequently. But that is where you start. And from that originates everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's those things that you're trying to that you're struggling with, the weight loss, the bad marriage, those things that you struggle with, those were the symptoms, not the cause.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So you have
Yeah.
to go deeper. And what I talk about all throughout the 12 shifts is not only how to do that, um, um, the hows and the whys are there, and all the tools are there. But that, again, what you eat and how you treat your body shows up on how you're going to perform at work. How you perform at work and the value that you bring in the marketplace is going to show up in your healthy finances. And
Right.
your healthy finances is going to somehow show its way up in, let's just say, your spiritual journey, right? And then before, I would think about it in such an esoteric way to where you compartmentalize it. And it's like, no, dude, it all plays together. What you watched last night, what you fed your mind, that's going to play into it. Who you
Right.
hang around, that's going to play into it. The decisions that you make, that's going to play into it. The environment that you have garnered, that's going to play into it.
Mm.
So one healthy habit leads to the next, and one unhealthy habit leads to another.
Yeah. If somebody's listening right now and they're tracking with you, they're going, "Oh man, I was in those same spots. I need to get out of this rut." What is step one that they can do right now? What's the first step, the one action step they can take today towards health, towards wellness?
it's going to sound so crazy and maybe simplistic, but
Buy your book. Is this where we should plug the book? Step 1, buy the 12 ships on Amazon.
Ding, ding, ding. There you go. There it is. That's step 1. I mean, okay, so can I tell you what I did? So I just
Yeah.
recommitted to some goals this morning. Okay. So I'm going to tell you step by step what I did. One is I made a decision to wake up a little bit earlier. Doesn't have to be hours, but you have to disrupt the routine that you're used to having. So even if it's a couple minutes, then set your alarm clock for a couple minutes earlier. So I got up a couple minutes earlier. The next thing I did was I fully made a decision that for me and the goals I've set for myself, I have some really stringent 2-week goals. And so I laid there in my bed and I said, this is what I'm going to do. There's no wavering. I'm not giving any shortcuts. There's no outs. There's no cheat codes. This is what's going to happen. The next thing I did was I wrote it down.
Yeah.
The next thing I did was I invited some people to come do it with me. So I got some accountability partners. Just so happened that there's like over 100 people that wanted to join. I didn't think it was going to be that many, so I'm not sure how it's going to work. But I thought maybe 3 or 4 accountability partners. But now you want to have someone to be accountable to. The next thing is I would say is set a really clear plan. So my plan was I had a very clear nutrition plan. I have a very clear plan on what my workouts are going to be. One of the things is to make sure that I'm at least once a day communicating to my wife how much I appreciate her. And so there's a very clear plan. The next thing I would do is part of that plan definitely is moving your body. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
The next thing I would do is don't start tomorrow before it's done. So what that means is tonight, make sure that you get out a piece of paper, even a 3x5 card, and you write down all the things that you want to do to win the day tomorrow. And so that when tomorrow shows up, you could just take out that little card you're looking at and you can check it off, which again does a lot for just the way that our bodies work and all the chemical endorphins and stuff that run through. So those are some things that really have helped me and how I get started when I'm ready to level up and just go to the next level in my health in my life.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. Part of this journey for me and this podcast is trying to see the whole elephant of faith, of God, spirituality, of those sorts of things. Where are people coming from? What are people seeing? So just kind of open-ended. I'll leave it up to you to set where we talk about this. Open-ended, no agenda, anything. God, faith, spirituality. Where are you at right now? What are you seeing? How does that? How do you respond to those sorts of things?
This has been an interesting one for me. It's been a journey. I would say right now I feel a deep practice and deep connection to God. But it hasn't always been that way. I grew up in a family, maybe like many Black families, to where you go to church quite a bit. And so I grew up in the church. On my mom's side, there's all deacons and pastors and evangelists. And so my mom's side of the family is highly, I would say, religious. And that's the environment that we grew up in. Obviously, I decided to go to university that had deep religious practices to where we had to take, lots of sort of theology courses on top of our undergrad studies, go to chapel 2-3 times a
Too
week.
many times.
I mean,
Way too many times.
we had a lot to do. I think about how much we did back
Dude,
then.
I really think that Christian universities need to take a hard look at how many times they're having kids go to chapel, man. Because I don't know about
Dude,
you,
it
but
was.
when I was done, I was like, I don't want to go to church on Sunday. I've been to church 3 times this week.
I was burnt out. I
Yeah.
was burnt out from religion, and I was
Yeah.
burnt out from religious people when I
Mm,
left university. And I was at a point to where I just felt like, man, I couldn't do anything right. I
yeah.
was every week, I felt like a failure. I felt like
What
I
what
was falling short.
what burnt you out about them?
I think the when it came to the people itself, there was a book that I think maybe my high school pastor gave me, and it says what bad Christians do to good people.
Mm,
And that's sort of how I was feeling at that time. Um, had a lot of friends, had a lot of people in my community that professed to be followers of Christ, um, but didn't always show up that way. And I
right.
felt like there was a lot of shame, guilt, sort of clicks,
Hmm.
almost sort of uh, nose turned up.
Yeah.
Um, and that along with me, and I told you, part of most human beings already feel like I'm not enough. So part of for so for me feeling like I'm already falling short. There's a lot of things, a lot of temptations, things that I want to do that I'm afraid to slip up in. If I slip up in, then how am I going to be viewed inside of God and the church and
Sure.
my school? And so there just felt like a lot of pressure for a young guy. I mean, we're only 21, 22 years old.
Right.
And upon leaving, I remember my last year at APU, I just decided I need a break. Like I need a
Yeah.
break from all this. Like I would almost rather just go to hell, man, than just feel this
then
feel this stress that
then constantly feel like you're walking on the thin ice that leads to hell.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It is
Yeah.
in the church I grew up in, I write about it quite a bit in the 12 shifts. It was always, ooh, child, you're gonna have a one-way ticket to hell, right? It was like
Yeah.
always that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was like there's so many rules, man. Like you couldn't come to church with if a woman was wearing her skirt, it had to be a certain length, and if it was up above her knees, and it was ooh, child, you're going to hell. And if Sister Kelly came to church and she had just bought a Mercedes Benz, and it was look how worldly she's been, and ooh, child, you got a one-way ticket to hell. And it was just like,
Right.
it was exhausting, man. And it
Right.
was
That's
exhausting.
interesting because coming out of APU, I mean, obviously I went into ministry,
Hmm.
but I was completely disconnected from the faith experience at APU because of some of
Mm,
the same things you're talking about. And,
yeah.
I think a lot of it is the fact that we were on the football team and the perception that people had of the football team. Because
Mm,
we weren't recruiting all Christian guys. We that's
right.
not what you do when you have a football team. um, and there it almost felt like we were excluded from things. And part of it is, kids are going to Christian college, they're there to figure out what their faith is, and then they
Sure.
figure it out and they think they're right. They think that they've completely figured it out. So they all get
Right.
together and they say, this is what worship is, this is how we worship, this is how we study, this is how we're in small groups. And if you don't completely buy into that experience, you're on the outside of it. So I
You're
never
on the outside.
I never felt connected to any kind of spiritual stuff that was going on at APU, but then I went into ministry. So it's not like it ruined my faith. I didn't feel part of it.
Yeah, you didn't feel that connection. For me, it made me become disinterested.
Mm,
And one of the things that I did, it's almost like a slap in the face to religion, the faith, to Christianity, was shortly after, maybe a year or two after graduating, I decided I would get my first tattoo.
mm,
And I would stay up. late at night thinking about my relationship with God, and almost as to the church as I'm going in a different direction. I drew up this illustration of the tattoo I wanted, and on my right and left pectorals is this huge cross, right? One cross
Mm-hmm.
here, one cross here, one cross on the right, one cross on the left, and in the middle it says unashamed.
Mm.
And what was interesting about that is a lot of my buddies, I have a lot of friends who are pastors' kids and now in ministry, and a lot of my friends, they were like, "Oh my gosh, like how cool!" Like,
Yeah.
like how cool you're being so outwardly like front and center with your faith and your beliefs and
Right.
what they
They
had
thought it
failed to
was
realize.
unashamed of God. You were saying, I'm
Yes,
unashamed of who I am.
of who I am,
Yeah,
of
that's
who I am.
beautiful.
I am going to be authentically me.
Because God is also unashamed of who you are.
Yes. Yes. And so I went on that journey of just really just, I'm in my mid 20s now and just trying to figure out who I am. And I'm tired of feeling bad all the time
Yeah.
about actions or thoughts or things I didn't even do but may have thought about. And now I'm freaking out over.
Yeah.
And I just said, I'm just going to try to figure me out. And so I took a step away for a long time, not until, believe it or not, not until I started building my coaching business.
Mm.
And now I start to connect with people. I start to
Yeah.
hear more of these stories. I start to see that there's a lot of things that I'm like, this cannot be a coincidence.
Yeah.
Like, this cannot be a coincidence that this is happening right now, or this person has showed up in my life, or this cannot be a coincidence that I've had this breakthrough, or this person that's been on my path and now it's supporting me and helping me. This cannot be a coincidence that all these people are having these transformations. And like, I was like, what is going on? So, like
Yeah.
most people do who are trying to find themselves, I decided to go on a little sabbatical. And so I left and went down to South America. And and by this time, I had already started to study a lot of spiritual teachers, not really religious teachers, but spiritual teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I started sort of uncovering that there's something that's happening. There's these laws of the universe.
Mm.
There's these things that are like, there's clearly this amazing force that's out there that's much bigger than us, that's moving in this amazing unison. And as you're working with a lot of people, you can have a tendency of getting really frustrated because they don't always show up the way that you want them to, right?
Yeah.
Like, believe it or not, they don't always do what you want. And so along my journey, one of the things I need to learn was empathy and agape love,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like a godlike, a Christ-like love, because you have to learn that people, when they're struggling, it's not because they want to, it's because they don't know how to change it.
Yeah.
And so as I'm going through this and as I'm trying to learn, how do I love? How do I have this agape love? How do I become more empathetic? The only thing I could do is now start studying a lot of people who are teaching these teachings and practices about love. And so when I went to South America, I said, I need to truly find out where I stand with God and with religion and religiosity and faith and spirituality and all these things. And so I went to Peru, and
Mm-hmm.
I did one of those um, sort of ayahuasca experiences where you go and you sit in a tent and you drink some potion and you have
Smoke
this sort of like
peyote.
yeah, and you have a guru who's sitting there in front of you, and so I had this crazy experience for about 6 hours. It was the most crazy thing ever. And I mean, this was just a crazy. I mean, but if you travel to South America and try to find yourself, you're not really thinking like, oh, I need to be safe. You're like, I'm just going to do whatever feels good today. And so I'm in some guy's backyard. I have no idea who he is. You know, you're in a city called Cusco in Peru, which is about
Mm-hmm.
14,000 feet above sea level. And God is speaking to me left and right, and it's the most powerful experience. And one of the things was the journey. And on his journey, showing me all these people that God had put in place to help strengthen me and how
Yeah.
God was using me. And none of it was happenstance. And that I was a part of the Father, and that I had these amazing tools and gifts, and that I truly could do all things. And it started to show me more of what my own purpose was.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, you know, I given myself back to Christ. And so now, I'm not like one of those people. This is what I'm not like, because what's got me here was studying and practicing Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on my wall right now, I have Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Thai monk.
Yeah.
I have all of these teachers that have played a big role, and that largely are teaching the same or similar messages.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, you know, I even today on my run, I ran the first 2 miles of my run was saying to use me and let your will be done through me. It was
Yeah.
like straight up for two. So now it's a big part of my life. It's a big part of my practice. But you know, I also don't feel like I need to be at a church in order to have this deep, profound relationship with God. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to be part of, some um, community. I like it, but I don't need it.
Mm.
Um, and and so I think, you know, I have a neighbor who lives up the street, and him and his father pastor a congregation here in the city that I live in. And I would say that they are definitely more probably radical than I am. I
Mm.
would say I would say I'm much more spiritual focused than I even am religious focused.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I think we went through very similar things over the last couple of years. You know, I grew up in a Christian home and I wasn't even taught bad theology necessarily. It was just so narrowly defined for me. I had great
Mm,
youth
hmm.
pastors. I had great parents that taught me about God and everything. And then, you know, the APU experience, learning Exodus, Deuteronomy class and all those things.
Sure.
It was just so narrowly defined for me, and God can't fit in any kind of narrowly defined box.
Yes. Oh my
And so
gosh.
there were
Yes.
so many things that, you know, I started to go, man, I don't know that prayer is that. Or I don't know if God does work that way, because you start to go out in
Mm,
the real world and you start talking to more people and you start seeing more things, and you've defined it in such a narrow way that stuff starts to not make sense. But
right.
I had the same kind of thing where when I started to look outside of Christianity, all I found was God, because God has been working through creation. God has been working through every individual life for all of eternity, that grace, love, mercy, peace, all those things that are of God are everywhere. Yes, of course
Yes.
they're in Buddhism.
Yes.
Of course they're in atheism. Of course, because I believe that God has been working and revealing himself through those things all times. And that we
Hmm.
don't, maybe the goal shouldn't be to try to bring people into our narrowly defined lane of what we're saying Christianity is in 2020, but maybe it's time for us to look out and recognize those things and go, yeah, like as a health coach, God can be found in the beauty of a transformed life. God can be found in
Hmm.
the beauty of an atheist transforming their life, right? And we don't need to try to make them Christians. We don't need to try to do any of that. We can celebrate the beauty of that with them.
See, the unique experience that you've gotten to have, and me too, and I think this is one of the things. Like if I had, um, like if I had my own, let's just say elementary school or something like that, even junior high. One of
Yeah.
the things that I would almost require is for people to move around the country. The
Mm,
best thing that's ever happened to me is having so many business partners in multiple states,
yeah.
right? Because now you get
You're
to
seeing the whole
see,
elephant. You're not
you
seeing
get
the
to
Temple
see
City
more.
APU perspective. You're seeing the whole elephant. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And it's so important. And on top of that, like even now, with what you're doing, you're going to speak to thousands of people, and you're going to get thousands of interesting ideas
Yeah.
and philosophies and beliefs. And you're going to sit there and you're going to be open and say, "Wow, okay, wow, like that person's a really good person, and this is what they believe. I can dig that. Like
Yeah.
that sounds plausible to me."
Yeah.
And and so that's been one of the biggest blessings for me on this journey, is just getting to hear the ideologies from thousands of people, and not just sitting in my own little comfort, like my own little idea of how things work.
Yeah.
um and I don't think that most people get that understanding.
Right.
For example, I went to go speak in all places of the world, a place called Ford City, Pennsylvania. Right? Like
Ooh, fun.
nobody has ever been there. And you spend 3-4 days with the people in Ford City, and you're like, huh, I can see why you have the ideas and the beliefs that you do. I get that. And then I go to, let's just say, Sparks, Nevada,
Hmm.
and do a talk there. Like, who's going to go to Sparks, Nevada? And then
Right.
you say, huh, I get it. I
Yeah.
understand, given
And
the climate of this.
you start to realize if you had been born and raised in Sparks, Nevada, you would think exactly
Yes,
like they think.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so now you say, okay, well, man, well, I can now start to see people the way, at least to a certain degree. I can now start to see people in a way that God sees people.
Yeah.
And what often happens is we cannot even come close to seeing that because we're stuck in our own paradigms.
Right. Right. It's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah.
I find way more opportunities to see God in that. And that excites me. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, in the attempt to learn and to grow and to see as many perspectives as I can. Dude, I really appreciate you doing this. I know you're a busy man. The fact that you carved out some time for me, I appreciate it. How can people follow what you're doing? What are the best websites? What's the best way to follow what you're doing?
Probably the best website would be to go to thinklifeisdifferent.com. Thinklifeisdifferent.com. And there you can find our written materials. Earlier this year, we put out a couple books. The latest book being a book called The 12 Shifts, which is, I think, it's pretty phenomenal. And so that's a really good place. Of course, all of the social media places, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Instagram, again, at the real Jamil Frazier, and you've pretty much used that handle for all the other ones.
Awesome, man. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you, man.